be surprised at how cold the water can be when the fish start spawning. We're fishing, I fish a lot of tournaments here on the upper Chesapeake. Any of you guys fish that place? Yeah, that's one of my favorites, the upper Chesapeake Bay. Now, March, we see spawning on the upper bay. We'll see. And now the water temperature's in the 40s and the largemouth are spawning. They come in with bloody tails, and that's a sure indication that these fish are starting to make beds. And what happens is it's really the light that triggers the spawn. It's the duration of light, the amount of light you get per day. That's the light switch. That tells it those fish it's springtime. It's time for us to start spawning activity. But generally, 50 to 55 degrees, you're going to start seeing it with smallmouth. A little bit cooler than largemouth. They generally start in the 60s. But the seasonal movements are key. And I tell anybody that I'm teaching about fishing, you know, I can sit up here and tell you about these magic lures, the Alabama rig, and all these other great weapons to catch fish. But if you don't have an understanding of the seasonal movements of fish, you're not going to have any success at all. The key, well, you can be the greatest fisherman in the world, but if you're fishing in a place where there is no fish, nothing's going to happen. So you got to have an understanding of what these fish are doing and when they're doing it. And right now we're in the wintertime mode. Some ice on central Pennsylvania up north of us. We have some ice, but we haven't seen any ice this year. And in these times, it's steeper, deeper, rocky areas is where the fish are going to locate themselves. And lack of current. That's the location this time of year. As we get to the spawn takes place, for a smallmouth, can take place anywhere. But they're going to move on to the shallows, whether that's on the island in the middle of the lake, a point in the middle of the lake. They'll spawn in creeks, they'll spawn in backs of coves and pockets. They'll spawn anywhere, anywhere in the lake, but gravel is key. That's one of the things that a smallmouth really looks for in a spawn. And wherever those gravel banks occur, that's where they're going to spawn. One of the really neat things about smallmouth is a largemouth is going to spawn back in a pocket, and he's going to spawn next to a stump, a grass clump, something that has protection for him. Well, smallmouth does similar stuff, but they use depth as protection a lot. They'll go down and spawn 10, 15, 20. I've seen them 25 and 30 feet deep out on Lake Erie spawning. So we can go, they can go pretty deep. When the spawn gets done, one of the funnest times of year for smallmouth takes place, and that's the post-spawn. When these fish come off the beds, it is just wide open. Oftentimes, schools of perch are up raiding the nests, the gobies are up raiding the nests, and the smallmouth are turning from a defensive position into a feeding position, and they start really just chomping them. And it's amazing. You know, jerk baits, top waters, spinner baits. This is a great, really, really fun time of year to catch some smallmouth. And that usually occurs in this relatively shallow water, depending on your lake. But and then as we get into the warm season, smallmouth tend to go deep. They tend to go deep, and they tend to cruise out in the middle of the lake. So that's going to be the summertime pattern. So we're not, so following those seasonal patterns is going to help you position yourself in the right area to catch fish. In the fall, we're going to see another shallow water movement. What happens is as the water cools, it matches the cool water below, and the bait fish come up. And when the bait fish come up, the predators come up right after them into the shallows. So we're going to look for them in shallow water in the fall. And then we go right back to steeper, deeper, rocky areas in the winter. So we follow their transition. We follow their movements. That's going to put us in a great position to be able to catch them, no matter what lake or river we're fishing. There are schooling fish. That's one of the things I love about them. I had a tournament up on Lake Erie 2 years ago, and I think one of the best fishing days I've ever had in my life out there. And I had found this little trough, and on Lake Erie, what happens is in the fall, again, the shad pull up in the shallows, and they start migrating into the rivers. And the bass that spend all summer deep come up shallow to get them. And it's easy to find them. Just follow the seagulls. A lot of guys that striper fish or fish for bluefish, you've seen that. Just follow the seagulls. Well, it's bass deal too. So get up on those flats, and I found this little trough on the flat where the shad were migrating by and the smallmouth were just blasting them. And I pulled up there in the tournament, and I made my first cast down that trough, and I caught about a 2.5 pound smallmouth, kind of an average fish for Lake Erie. But for the next 3 hours, my partner and I caught one, called one, or netted the other guy's fish for 3 straight hours out of a massive school of smallmouth. And I'm going to tell you about some of the tricks and tactics I use to keep them biting, because it's not that easy. It's just finding the fish isn't enough. You got to learn to be able to keep them biting. And what often happens, you guys may have seen this before. You catch a fish, a smallmouth or two, and you release them, and he goes back and tells all his buddies what you're doing up there.